Yes, you! Are you stuck in the past? Do you turn your head away from the present day and live only through memories of better times? Ah, yes, nostalgia. You're not alone. It is a plague that affects every last human on Earth. And in grim times like these, we are especially susceptible to nostalgia. But don't you worry, nostalgia is harmless. This is WJAZ Radio, and today we're sitting down with Jennifer Coey, Professor of Nostalgia at the University of British Columbia.
We tend to think of nostalgia as something related to being old. Nostalgia is something that your grandparents do. And I'm not saying it's not, it is. And it's usually because they, how can I put this nicely, they don't have a future, they're going to die soon. So of course they begin to look to the past as a way to almost make the present more bearable. And I think that's the type of nostalgia that most people would understand. But there are many different types of nostalgia.
My name is Michael Arnold. I work in the construction industry. Born and raised here on the North Shore, actually. And then in about 2002, I moved to Korea. Nostalgic Sentimental Vancouver is a group that I started before I moved back to Vancouver. I was homesick. I wanted to reminisce about some of the old buildings and things I loved about Vancouver very much. So I started uploading pictures, just randomly finding pictures on the World Wide Web and getting some information about those certain buildings and things and uploading them. And then now it's up to about almost 60,000 members, I think. People are all very sentimental and very nostalgic about their old days, their old times, for sure. It's a good thing, but there's a fine line between it being, rewarding and living in the past. There's a lot of people who just say how bad things are these days compared to the way they used to be, and I would never want to be in your generation, that kind of thing. I think that's really living in the past, and that's not healthy in any way. So I think that I've got a good grasp of the past and the present, but I think a lot of people don't.
This is me. 62-piece kit. That was 1980, 79.
Those are very much the individualized forms of nostalgia, but we also have collective forms where we have different groups who have a nostalgia that comes out of the collective experience and the collective narrative. Restorative nostalgia is romanticizing a moment in the past, but wanting to return to it, or more to the point, bring it back. Because people who have restorative nostalgia, they know they can't go back to the past, but they very much feel often that their country has gone down the wrong road, that it has become unrecognizable, that the values of the past that made their country great have been lost. And that can very much lead into historical nostalgia, which is a romanticization of certain periods in the past, certain decades, sometimes certain centuries, which are perceived as somehow better. It can become negative when there is a misrepresentation of history, a cherry picking of history.
Take your guests back in time to the Wild West of the 1880s with our state-of-the-art green screen photography.
And it can become very polarizing, especially when you have different groups who see the same historical periods quite differently.
Hi, I'm Jack Froese. I'm the mayor of the Township of Langley. I was elected in 2011. This is my third term, and we're sitting now in beautiful Fort Langley, right next to the historic Fort Langley Hudson's Bay Museum and Fort. You know, Fort Langley is one of the older communities in British Columbia. We like to call it the birthplace of British Columbia because in 1858, Sir James Douglas declared British Columbia as a crown colony of the British Empire. So we have that significance of being the birthplace of British Columbia. The old West Town, you know, there's some fun to it. I think we all have a little bit of nostalgia. We like to go back and see the way it was. You know, how did people live, you know, 50 years, 60 years, 100 years ago?
But don't you worry, nostalgia is.
To me, really, archives are very much part of the present and part of the future. Well, I have to say that I love being able to preserve people's feelings, thoughts, words. I think it's amazing to be able to watch something, someone, or a place that you're familiar with and see it, what it looked like 100 years ago or eventually 1,000 years ago. I've seen evidence of when someone connects with reading a letter of, you know, a grandparent or a great-grandparent, and to have that emotional connection to something that's in the archives is a very powerful and beautiful thing. But for me, like I said, I mean, I'm not in love with the past. I'm actually quite in love with the future. One of the misconceptions about archives is that we store everything, that we're hoarders, that we're interested in keeping everything from the past. And that could not be more inaccurate. The one thing that archivists are very good at is selecting. Well, originally, archives are from the era of wealthy powers that be, so kings, queens, nobility, governments. They are the elite, or they are simply, you know, the most dominant community members. And so archives often only tell a few stories. I think that it's important to understand that there are many truths and there are different perspectives on every event that occurred. And when you go to an archives, you may be seeking reinforcement for your own view. You may or may not find it depending on who you are.
What do we remember? What do we highlight? But at the same time, what do we choose to forget?